With Scream 3, I felt they should have left well enough alone. All the loose ends were tied, and even though that last movie was cliché, routine, and more than a little goofy, it was a pretty good way to end the series. The whole Scream trilogy played out like a soap opera. We just had to know what was going to happen next. To my knowledge, that's never been done before in the horror genre. Over the last 10 years, there were many rumors about the series being revived. This was the decade of reboots, so it seemed only natural that they would do the same thing here. Take the overused formula of the ghost-faced killer and just start fresh with a new cast. I don't care what number you put in front of the title. Without Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette, it's not Scream. So finally, the pieces were set in place and Dimension finally got the ball rolling on Scream 4, which apparently would be the start of a new trilogy for Wes Craven. He even came to my home state of Michigan to shoot many of the scenes because, at the time, apparently Michigan had the biggest film incentive in the country for filmmakers to come and shoot stuff. Of course, the story was kept hush-hush, and as a fan of the original trilogy, I couldn't wait to see it, just for curiosity's sakes. I didn't feel like there was anything else they needed to say, so obviously they were just going to start with a new story. I was elated to discover that the original cast would be coming back, but for how long? Would they pull a Halloween resurrection, killing off the original cast within the first 5 minutes, so they could move on to a new generation of victims? I was crossing my fingers because that would have been incredibly disappointing. 3 movies where everyone survives, only to kill them off 10 years later? What a waste. Thankfully, they didn't do that. Sid, Dewey, and Gale are all back as the central characters, with a fresh new cast of high school kids up for slaughter. The movie starts off with the usual setup where 2 girls are sitting around dissecting horror movies when they get an obscene phone call. Ghostface shows up to kill them both, we pull back, and, surprise, surprise, it was the opening to Stab 6. It's revealed that 2 more girls were watching Stab 6. They start dissecting horror movies. When one of the girls stabs the other, we'll pull back, and another shocker, we were watching the beginning of Stab 7. Maybe the whole movie is just one big series of intros to the fake Stab series. That's not the best way to start off this new trilogy, guys. So finally, the real movie starts with yet another couple of girls switching off the movie and talking about the evolution of the Stab franchise. They get, you'll never believe this, a prank phone call from a mysterious, raspy voice. The girls ignore it while they go try to scare each other. This time, the real Ghostface shows up, and in a scene ripped straight from the original, he crushes the girl with the garage door before stabbing her. We pull back and... Stab fucking 8? Seriously, is this movie ever going to start? No, just kidding. It's the beginning of the movie. Remember when people bitched that Return of the King had too many closures? Well, I'll take the 15 endings of that movie over the 15 beginnings we get here. So as it turns out, Woodsboro is celebrating its anniversary of the Woodsboro murders. A city that celebrates its misfortunes? Only in the movies. Sidney Prescott is returning after a 10-year hiatus to do a public book signing for her self-help book, Out of Darkness. Dewey and Gale are still married, although they're struggling because Dewey is now the sheriff of Woodsboro, and Gale has been out of work for so long.
I have no fucking idea what to write.
Then we meet the new cast, and wouldn't you know it, it's all girls. There's Kirby, Jill, and Olivia, and I couldn't really tell you much about them because they're your average stock horror movie victims, and they're more than likely going to die anyway. I'm serious, we never care about any of these characters. So apparently, Jill just broke up with her boyfriend Trevor, and he keeps calling Kirby and Olivia to plead his forgiveness to Jill. Jill is also Sidney's cousin. A relative. I wonder how they're going to squeeze her into the plot. Then there's Deputy Judy Hicks, who tries to come in between Gale and Dewey by making him lemon treats.
You're not cheating on your wife if you eat my lemon square.
Yeah, but I would be cheating on my diet.
Your lemon squares taste like ass.
At this point, I kind of stopped taking the movie seriously. Between the goofy intros, the 90210 drama of the high school kids, and Marley Shelton's overacting, although it's not as bad as Parker Posey's, I'm just not feeling the vibe. We then meet the wannabe Randys because, let's face it, that's all they are. Robbie and Charlie, the film geeks of the movie. And Trevor, the creepy, overprotective loser boyfriend that no one cares about. He's no Skeet Ulrich, that's all I'm saying. So back to the characters we actually care about. Dewey gets a distress call to investigate a murder and then makes it back to Sidney's book signing to warn the Woodsboro residents. They track a cell phone to the back of Sidney's rental car where they find a bloody surprise. Gale wants nothing more than to reinvigorate her career by helping Dewey solve the murders, but finds herself some competition in the younger, more attractive Deputy Judy. At the same time, Dewey doesn't want her involved because she's not a reporter anymore. So Gail, that spiteful, spunky woman that we all know and love, decides to go renegade and start solving the mystery on her own by teaming up with the high school video nerds.
2 generations of cutting-edge journalists intertwining our passions for media.
There's a scene at Jill's house where Sydney stays while the police investigate. Sydney walks in on Jill just as her former boyfriend Trevor leaves through her window, reminding us of the events of the first film. That's good, because nothing else is. Then there's this creepy scene where Sydney is confronted by Deputy Judy, who claims to know Sid all the way from high school. The way she emerges from the shadows just screams killer. Sydney once again gets a call from Ghostface and actually witnesses one of the girls getting stabbed in the house next door. She and Jill get attacked just in time for the ex-boyfriend to come in and save the day. Does this all sound familiar? The film geeks get Sydney to come to their film class to share her real-life experiences regarding the murders, as well as give their own insight on what they think the current killer is planning. They believe he's filming the kills real-time and broadcasting them on the web, leaving behind a permanent legacy. We then get close to the finale, which takes place in a barn where Robbie and Charlie host their annual Stabathon, an event where they screen the entire Stab series to a rapturous audience. Gail sneaks in and plants cameras around the joint to try and capture the killer on film. Things don't go as planned, but let's face it, when do they ever? When the killer covers up all the cameras, leaving Gail to pursue him on her own. Did her IQ drop several points over the past decade? I have even less respect for her now than I did when she was quasi-famous. We switch over to the cops, Deputies Perkins and Haas, who talk about, what else? Cop movies. Like everyone else, they establish their own rules for how cops survive horror films, while doing a little homage to the original Scream. Of course, somehow, both cops get killed, with Perkins uttering his famous line.
Fuck Bruce Willis.
Seriously, the guy was stabbed in the head. No, I can't accept this. This is beyond comic relief. This is like a parody. Then we're in a house where Jill's mother and Robbie get killed.
I'm gay. I'm gay. If it helps.
As Charlie and Kirby start falling for each other, because they both share a passion for horror movies, I guess, Kirby finds Charlie strapped to a chair in a scene that blatantly steals from the first movie. Kirby gets her phone call in which she gets asked to name the horror remake, and then she launches into a tirade of all the horror remakes that were filmed between, let's say 2000 and now.
Halloween, Texas Chainsaw, Dawn of the Dead, The Hills Have Eyes, Amityville Horror, Last House on the Left, Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, My Bloody Valentine, When a Stranger Calls, Prom Night, Black Christmas, House of Wax, The Fog, Piranha. It's one of those, right?
None of the above.
She goes outside, unties Charlie, and discovers she probably shouldn't have done that. So the killers in this film, Charlie and Sid's cousin Jill. Charlie is just another random choice, much like Mickey from Scream 2. And Jill, being yet another blood relative to Sid, was kind of obvious. Her motive has to be the most lame one yet.
Do you know what it was like growing up in this family? Related to you? I mean, all I ever heard was Sydney this and Sydney that and Sydney, Sydney, Sydney.
After she kills Trevor and Charlie, she finally stabs Sid. Then we get the most ridiculous scene ever in the entire series. To make the crime scene look authentic, she goes out of her way to physically abuse herself to the point of absurdity. This one's hard to watch with a straight face. It comes right out of Scary Movie. I can't believe they did this. So Jill gets rushed to the hospital and finds out, much to her chagrin, that Sydney is still alive. Gail and Dewey find out a little late that Jill is the actual killer, and they go to head her off. There's a last-minute fight, some exchange dialogue, and yeah, of course, the good guys win. Sydney utters probably the best line of the whole movie.
You forgot the first rule of remakes, Jill. Don't fuck with the original.
And then we find out that Jill got what she wanted. She comes out as the hero, even though she's dead. I don't know about this one. When Steven Spielberg talked about the Crystal Skull's relevance to the original indie movies, he called it a blood relative. That's how I would describe this one. A blood relative to the original 3 movies, but definitely an unnecessary sequel. How would they go on to continue a new trilogy? Aside from the same original cast as before, all the new characters die. Aside from Deputy Judy, somehow that bitch survived. Obviously it's Hollywood and they can always find ways to resurrect a franchise as long as their greedy pockets are being lined. I have 2 big problems with this one. First, most of the characters just sit around dissecting horror movies. That's most of the conversations right there. Sure, there were some fun horror movie nods in the original trilogy, but seriously, that's all anyone in this movie wants to talk about. It's like Kevin Smith, not Williamson, wrote the script. And the characters aren't even remotely interesting. The only ones I genuinely cared about were Dewey, Gale, and Sid, and seriously, I think even they're starting to run their course.
So anyway, kudos on being brave enough to drop off the professional map. Any plans on revitalizing your tarnished brand?
Listen, in about 2 seconds, I'm gonna revitalize your face with my tarnished brand. I still got it.
None of them had anything new to offer to the story. And secondly, this just isn't a very serious movie. It's got its share of gore, but it feels more like a parody. There are a lot of slapsticky moments that actually make me appreciate Scream 3 that much more. This feels more like a scary movie sequel. That ending with Jill just slamming herself into a coffee table is simply ridiculous. After 10 years, I would have hoped for something a little more clever. I heard that during production there were several battles with the Weinsteins and screenwriter Kevin Williamson, and I wonder if that had anything to do with it. But I've noticed that as the series went on, they just became sillier and sillier. I thought Scream 3 was crossing the line, but this one crosses it even further. It's just an average slasher movie with some familiar cast members stepping on board to try to make it worthy of the Scream name. They make it stand out a little more, and it still has that Scream feel, but can't they take the franchise a little more seriously? We went from a film that had very little humor, the characters were funny, but the story was pretty dark, to a movie that's just goofy in nature. Even Scream 3 had its dark moments when it tried. Scream 4 is Scream for the MTV generation. God, I'm seriously outdating myself there. If you want a fun little slasher, watch the first 3 movies, and then, if you're still in the need for your Ghostface fix, you might want to try this one. But its only real merit is the return of Sid, Gale, and Dewey. Everyone else is just a cardboard cutout.